I thought faith was like a lever. Picture this. And like when we pull the lever, have faith. Give him a praise. Give him a praise. When praises go up, blessings come down. It's like transactional, right? It's like jackpot, Jesus. It's like, yes, Lord, like I'm going to pray my kid's going to make straight A's. I'm going to pray and I'm going to stop, my headache's going to go away. I'm going to pray. Let's see. Faith is not a lever. Faith is a lens. A way of seeing your situation. And sometimes faith changes the situation. Sometimes faith changes the way you see the situation. Sometimes God changes it. Sometimes he changes me.
Morning, North. Good morning. They don't like me as much as y'all like Ricky, huh? Good morning, North. Good morning. There we go. Can we turn the lights back off? Yeah. I went through this week, and honestly, this has been about one of the hardest weeks I've had in years. I hadn't talked to many people about it. I hadn't talked to Vince, one of my closest friends. I hadn't really mentioned it to him. I hadn't mentioned it to much of anybody. And I got to the point Friday, I literally almost called Vince and was like, you're going to have to find somebody else to do it. I can't stand. One of the reasons I couldn't, it was so hard, was because I was struggling with something that God wanted me to talk about. It was not the point of what he was wanting me to talk about, but because I was literally going through it. I was at my breaking point this week several times. I've been in my breaking point for about 3 weeks, and it's like I keep coming back to it. No matter how good things got, they would always go back right where they were, and I was so confused, and I got so angry with God because I didn't know why I was having to do, because I felt like I was doing all that I could for God. I feel like we do that a lot as Christians, is we talk about all we've done for God and nothing about what God's done for us. And we focus on that topic so much about, well, I've done this. That's literally what I was going through these past few weeks, is I was battling everything I was battling inside of my own head, inside of my own home, inside of everything I was going through. I kept going, why me? Have I not done enough? Have I not, I'm working as much as I can to support my home, and I'm working as much as I can to support the ministry, and it was like I was getting picked on almost, that nothing I could do would make anything in my life go correctly. And the reason I felt like I had to stand today, because I know I'm not the only one in this church that's going through it. I know I'm not the only one that has sleepless nights. I know I'm not the only one that is literally sat and sobbed in the room and didn't know what else to do. And I was telling Ricky, I've been preaching for 15 years now, and this has never gotten any easier. But the last time I preached, and it was this hard, it was when he made me talk about the night I almost committed suicide. So y'all pray for me. That's why I said all that. I wanted the lights turned out, because I don't want, I'm sorry if live feed can't see me, but I don't want any of this focus to be on me. I don't want anything that I'm doing or saying, anything I'm doing to be overcame by anything else going on. I just want to take a few minutes and be real with you guys. Is that all right? A lot of times we get to that point where everything's hanging on by a thread, and I'm going to come down here and sit, because I'm talking to me as much as I'm talking to y'all this morning. God literally changed my scripture right before I got up here this morning, right before service started. So, you know, a lot of times we go through this Christian life, and this is some of the things I had to realize this week is we go through, and just because we're holding on, we think we've held enough. Just because our thread's still there and nothing's been broken yet, we think we're still good. And in all reality, God's trying to fix what's already been broken. See, when we're to that point, we think we're beyond all hope because we're down to our last thread, our last moment in life where everything's about to snap. Can't tell you how I was so close to that point Friday where I felt like my life was literally hanging on by a thread, and all I could do was watch it snap. But it was because I'd forgotten who my daddy was. I'd forgotten where my faith had stored. I'd forgotten who controlled my life when I allowed him to. I'd forgotten who brought me back to the cross when I allowed him to. You know, Vince was talking, he was talking about when he was going through what he was going through. I told him I'd literally break his leg and drag him back to church. And that's because that was the first thing that popped in my head is when a sheep goes astray, that's what the shepherd does. He goes and he breaks her leg and he brings them back to the herd. So they can't run again. And we think because our leg's broken that God's being mean to us. We think because God chased after us and allowed us to go through everything we went through, and we've struggled as much as we struggled, we think because of that God's forgotten about us, or God's just being mean, or God's allowing us to go through things that are unfair, even though we're doing all that we can for Him. And it's in those moments where we get our legs broken that God's trying to bring us back. That's literally what happens right after. When the shepherd breaks the sheep's leg, it's to bring them back to the herd. It's for no other reason. And I guess I gotten to a point this week where I felt like both my legs were broke. Like I didn't know how to run, how to get through. I didn't know what to do. My wife can attest to it. Friday night, I literally sat and cried for hours and hours and hours. Before I came in here, I was listening to worship music and crying. You know, Genesis 22 talks about when Jacob says wrestle with God. Some people say he wrestles with an angel. But he talks about, they fought through all the night, and Jacob said, I won't let you go till you bless me. And that God reached down and touched his hip and literally threw his hip out of socket. And at that point, like I was saying, we always view things that we go through. We may have viewed COVID as, one of the worst things we could ever went through as a nation or as a world, because it impacted the entire world. We may have viewed things we're going through in life as something that we can't withstand or can't withhold. But it's in those moments where God's trying to bring us back. God was trying to bring this nation back to where He wanted us. He was trying to bring us back into the fold. He's trying to bring our church back into the fold. We look at our church and we're like, God, the church is struggling. I'm not talking about just North Church. I'm talking about church in general. Church is struggling right now. If you look at churches across the nation, we're not the only church that's fighting to try to get people to come back into church, that's fighting to try to get people to study, to pray. I've talked to pastor after pastor, and it's the same thing with every pastor. They're all fighting the same battle. Because instead of getting our legs broke and allowing God to carry us back to the herd, we broke our legs and went, God, you so mean, and walked away or hopped away. And I wonder how many of us in here are willing to fight with God all night till we get a blessing. Or do we walk in like we do every Sunday and we expect God to just bless us because we're here? This can be your battleground. This can be where you go toe-to-toe with the enemy. This can be where you go toe-to-toe with yourself, and you can fight with all you have with God on your side, or you can walk out of the service the exact same way you walked in. Powerless and winless because you didn't fight the battle that God had called you to fight. The good thing about coming into this battleground, though, is that you have brothers and sisters that are willing to fight with you. Amen. That you have somebody willing to go toe-to-toe with whatever you're facing and say, we will not stop until we are blessed. That's the good thing about coming into the service, and I'm speaking to everybody on live feed. I guess God's trying to talk to them between me and Ricky both today, but the good thing about coming into this building is not exactly that it's a building. It's not that you have to look at me or you had to look at Vince or you had to look at Ricky. It's because this is where we fight our battles. This is where we hit our knees and we stand the tallest. This is where we can come in and we can say, my brothers and sisters surround me. The power of God is within me. And this is where I can fight everything that I've been going through this week and I can win. Amen. Or we can come into this church and never let anything change. We can come into this church and we can never fight. We can come into this church and we can never pray. We can come in here and never worship. We can come in here and never listen to the message. And we can go out there and do the exact same thing we did and blame it on God, blame it on the devil, blame it on the atmosphere, COVID. Or we can hit our knees when we come into this church and truly give it all to God. You know, we talk about this as, you know, a worship station. I've gotten in a bad habit of doing it. I always say, you know, it's my job to get them to church and I'll let God sort them out from there. This is where we fight with each other. This is where we fight together and we say God is on our side and we won't stop until we are blessed. That's when this church has been the strongest, is when we've stood together and we've said, God, we won't stop until you bless us. But it took us standing together and laying it all out there and saying, I can't do this on my own. I need my family. I need my God. I need everybody around me to support me right now and fight. You can ask Ricky. It wasn't until we stopped and we said, as a church, we're going to battle this together. Ricky's not battling alone. We're going to battle this together, and we will not stop until we are blessed. We will not stop until this blessing comes. And we prayed and we prayed and we prayed and we went outside of church and we prayed and we prayed and we went home and we prayed and God blessed. The problem isn't because God's not here. The problem isn't because the devil's fought you too much. The problem is us. The problem is because we've forgotten what church is. We think because we're here that we're doing what we're supposed to do. That we showed up, God bless me. This was a literal fight between Jacob and God. It took him fighting, not just coming in. He could have said, I looked in the face of God and I sat there and I told him to bless me. That could have been the end of that scripture, was I sat in God's presence and I told him to bless me. A lot of us look at that as a blessing. But he battled until he was blessed. This church, we've came in here with expectations before. This ain't even close to what I was planning on preaching, but we've came into this church with expectations before. We've came in here with basically ground rules for how this service is going to go. What we expected out of the service, what we expected out of the worship, what we expected out of the preaching. And those have been some of the most dynamic, life-changing services that we've ever had in this church. I talk about it all the time, but night of worship, it blew me away because we had talked about it, we had prayed about it, and we came in here setting the expectation that God was going to move. We've let our expectations down. We let our expectations down. God's still willing to move like He's never moved before. God's still willing to battle with you. God's still, all these battles have won. It's your expectation of winning the battle that's changed. It's you walked into the battle and already been defeated. You walked into this church and you left defeated. You walked into this church and you've been defeated and you left defeated. And it's our fault. It's my fault. I walked in this morning and I begged God to not let everything that had been going on through this week tear me down before I got up here. Because even when I walked into this service, I didn't know how I was going to have the boldness to get up here and preach. But we think when we become a Christian that everything's supposed to be roses and butterflies and big bright rainbows with promises. But we don't ever talk about this. When we've held on and we've held on, and we're to the point we're looking at and we go, God, there's one last thread. God, we're to the point of where if you tug anymore, it's broken. If we pull at this anymore, then I'm not going to survive. I'm hanging off the cliff, and this is all that's left. Have you ever thought about that? If you're hanging from a cliff and this is what you see, what would be your knee-jerk reaction? To sit there and watch it break? That was what I was going to do this week. I was going to sit there and hold on. I'm holding on, God. I'm doing enough. Sometimes holding on is not enough. I'm not telling you to let go of the rope. If you would reach the other side of that rope and fight to climb, you'll get past that breaking point. But your breakthrough won't come until you break through where your breaking point's at. This breaking point's not bad. There's things on the other side of this rope that God's trying to get rid of in your life. There's things on the other side that God don't want there. There's things that you've been holding on to. We think because we're holding on to this area in our life and we're fighting to see God move, we think we're doing good, but there's things that God don't want you holding on to anymore. There's things that are part of that rope. We ask God, why'd you let me get here? Because we've been holding on to things that are tearing us down. We've been holding on to things that are about to literally let us die. But all you got to do is crawl past this point. But it's going to take you standing up and say, God, I'm willing to fight. If you were hanging on the edge of this rope and you were to the right of this rope, hanging off the edge of a cliff, I would hope that your fight or flight instincts get a kick in and you begin to fight with all your might and you try to crawl past that point. That's why it's what most people would do. So don't change it for your Christian life. We look at it and we go, I'm going to let it, I don't know what to do, God. You let me get to this point. You didn't make this rope strong enough. This rope ain't good enough. The rope that you threw down to me, you should have known that it had that frail. You should have known that there was this point, there was a weak point in here. God's trying to get us past that point as a church. If you're watching on live feed right now and you ain't came back to this church for any other reason but you're sick or you can't come to this church, you got an option. If you're sitting in here and you've been fighting and you've been battling something and you're sitting there staring at this point, you got an option. You can either hold on to what you've been holding on to, and you can let this rope break and let it kill you, or you can fight to crawl past it. This morning, this ain't about me. This ain't about North Church. This ain't about Vince. This ain't about Ricky. This ain't about nothing. This is about you and God. I promise you, I'm not. I was talking to somebody. I talked to so many people this morning. I was talking to somebody, and he's like, "Why are you nervous?" I said, "Because this is so far out of my comfort zone from who I normally am. If you get around me out in public, most of the time I'm very, very quiet, to the point of where we went to my wife's work thing a few nights ago, and they were asking if I was mad when I walked away. That's how quiet I am. And I, for some reason, hang around people like Vince and my wife. I guess because it's the opposite of what I am, and I need somebody to fill the silence. Vince is a social butterfly. I don't know why he's over here fronting. He's not an introvert. He flies around and goes, "Who can I help next?" I'm like, stop! But we're at a point in this church where this church can either break and we can fold, or we can stand up this morning and say, "God, I want to fight. God, my hip may be broken, but I want to fight. God, my life may be broken, but I want to fight. God, my life may be to this last thread, and I may be looking at the breaking point of my life, and I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm fixing to crawl past it this morning." But it's going to take you wanting to fight. God has so much more for you on the other side of this rope. God has so much more for you when you finish crawling this rope. Don't let this point stop you from getting to where God's got you, wanting you to go. Don't let this point be the point that breaks you down, because there's so much more. Yeah, you may see, we get past this point. Some of us get past this point, and we're like, "I done crawled past this point 3 or 4 times, and I'm still not to the top of the rope yet." There's been 3 or 4 weak points in my life where I've broken. This week wasn't the first time that I've been down in where I've been. It's just the first time in a while. But I could have made a choice this morning. I could have turned my phone off, and I could have told Vince to fluff off. If Vince would have came in here and probably blessed me out on stage and then preached y'all a message. And I knew that when all hope was lost, if I lost my hope, that y'all would still get what God would still have His glory this morning, even if I gave up. But I came this morning because I felt like there was somebody else willing to fight with me. I ain't gonna lie. As soon as that music starts playing, I'm probably gonna hit the altar. But I'm not the only one in here who's looking at a breaking point. I know I'm not. It's hit me too hard this morning. If this was my battle to fight alone, if I was the only one in here that was facing a breaking point, I would have faced this last night, and I would have got over it, and I would have prayed through it. But for some reason, it's still been hitting me. This morning, I'm telling you, don't give up. This morning, I'm telling you that Jacob had to fight God all night sometimes. Jacob had to fight God all night to get his blessing. You may be in the fight for your life right now, and you may not understand why. You may not understand how. You may not understand why me. Why, I've been through everything that I've been through. I've been through suicide. I've lost a kid. I about lost another kid. I've lost jobs. I've lost cars. I've lost houses. At what point does life and God stop picking on me? That was a literal question I asked myself this week. At one point, does life stop picking on me? At what point do I stop losing things that are important to me? And God said, I need you to fight just a little bit longer. I need you to crawl just a little bit harder. I felt like my hip had been knocked out of socket a few times this week. But I forgot it. It's those points that God's saying, now it's my turn. I took your hip out of socket so I could carry you. Because I knew, I've been playing with these magnets all morning, and I honestly didn't even think I was going to use them after I fought so hard to look for them. And my son finally brought to them went to the door. But we think, when you think of magnets, you automatically think of things that attract each other. Things that come together, right? But what a lot of people don't realize is when they come together in the wrong way, there's a force that keeps them apart. They can touch. Some magnets you can't touch when they're the opposite forces with them. But you can touch, you can be there, you can be in the presence. You can even hold them together sometimes. But as soon as you let go, that force is back there. I feel like some of us has been doing that with church. We've come to church. We may have stayed here for a little bit. We may have heard the singing. And then we took our magnet and we walked back away, and then we come back to church, and we may fight a little bit, like Ricky was talking about this morning. We may make excuses. It may be hard, and oh, God, I fought through it. I'm here. But the problem is we never let go of that magnet. We never let go of ourselves. We never let go of our problems. So when we walk back away from God, the force that we've created, because we didn't come in the right way, we didn't come to God the right way, we didn't come in here and really just lay it on the line, lay it down to God and say, God, I really am walking away. Like, I'm not picking this back up this week. I'm not picking this back up this morning. I really am just walking away this time. We walk in here and we come in here and we sit down, and I don't feel nothing. When's the last time you came in here with an expectation that God was going to change your life? When's the last time you walked in here and you said, God, you may not change my life, but you're going to change somebody's life this morning. Somebody's going to get a blessing. I'm going to pray it through. When's the last time you walked in here and thought, this is going to be the best worship service we ever have? When's the last time you walked in here and you thought, when I walk out of this building, I'm going to tell literally everybody I come in contact with about God? How many times, if you're any kind of sports fan, but if you're a Braves fan, how many times this week have you talked about the World Series? And how many times have we talked about God? God is doing just as miraculous things as what happened on that field. I mean, that was a miraculous. That whole season was miraculous. Hank Aaron must have been looking over him, is all I'm going to say. But God is doing so much greater in your life, and yet we don't tell anybody about it. See, because it's not until we let go that we can truly come in contact with what God's wanting to do with us. Because when I let go, those magnets are never going to come together the wrong way. They're never going to be able to stay away. Well, it helps if I don't drop them on the floor. But they're never going to come to a point of resisting one another when I just let go. They're always going to come together. If you need a connection with God this morning, come to Him in the right way. Not thinking about where you're going to church afterwards, not thinking about what you're doing after church, what game you're going to watch, what food you're going to eat. Come to God and say, for these next 30 minutes, these next 10 minutes, these next 5 minutes, I am yours. Because if you don't come in and give God it all this morning, you're wasting your own time. If you don't come in and allow God to change your life like never before, if you walk in and you're still looking at this side of the thread, you've wasted your own time. Because God's calling on you this morning to fight. You may look at me and you say, but I've been fighting. Fight harder. There's a point that God is going to bless you, and when you get to the other side of it, you're going to look back and be like, man, I'm glad I didn't hang on to what I was holding on to. If I'd have held on to that part of the rope any longer, if I'd have held on to everything that I was going through any longer, it would have snapped and I would have died. But thank God I fought. That wasn't the first breaking point. That may have been the fourth or the fifth or the sixth. But thank God I fought past it, because this mountaintop is so much nicer. What I'm looking at now, and I'm not having to hold on to a rope to live. I'm not having to fight for my life. This moment in Christ is so much more powerful than I ever realized. Amen. As they play the song this morning, I don't know who's fighting through it. I don't get to talk to everybody in this church. Unfortunately, I don't know all your struggles. I don't know all your fears. I don't know what you've been going through. But I know I'm not the only one. I know there's somebody else in here that is fighting for their life this morning. Maybe not literally, but mentally, you're fighting. You're not alone. God's talking to you this morning and saying, fight a little longer. This may be a breaking point, but this is just your breakthrough. What's on the other side of this rope is so much greater. But you've got to get through this point. These altars are open, and you can use them or you can let them sit here. We've let them sit here for too long. We can fight together or we can fight alone. But this morning I'm fighting with you. be seated for just a minute. This morning, I'm going to ask them to play that song one more time as we're closing out. And I'm going to do something I don't typically do. I usually run out there so I can greet everybody at the door. I'm going to hang around in here. This altar is not closed. Don't walk out of this building fighting what you came in here fighting. Just because that song's over, just because the service is over, this altar is not closed. Prayer's not over just because you're not in the building. Don't go through this week looking at your breaking point. Fight past it, because I promise you God's got so much more for you. And I think I forgot that more than a few times this week, but God has so much more past this point. Don't keep holding on to what you're holding on to and break with this rope. Don't forget about tonight. We got students. Right, okay. 4:45 is when the doors open. We usually get started around 5. It's a great time. I've never heard any student complain. Maybe it's because I'm one of the leaders, but they always say they have a lot of fun. Am I forgetting anything else? Other than Bible study? Yeah. Oh, yeah, I owe y'all apology. Vince texted me when it was way too late and said, you forgetting what day it is? And I was like, yeah, kind of. And he was like, it's Wednesday. Yeah, I beat myself up for a week about that, but I didn't even remember. My week's been so jumbled, I honest to goodness, I didn't even know what day it was. I didn't even know what he was talking about when he initially texted me, but I promise I set an alarm on my phone. We will have Bible study this Wednesday night, 6:45 on Facebook Live. If you're on live feed, get back in this building. If you can, if there's any way possible, get back in this building, because we're in a war that we don't even realize, and we need to all fight together. Don't fight it alone. You can't fight it. It's hard to fight when you're by yourself. There's power in numbers, and God's got so much greater things in this church to do. He's not finished yet. We're going into our last part of worship, our tithes and offering. We tell you guys constantly, give as much as you can, because this church needs it. It don't go to anybody in this church. It just goes straight to this church. It goes to the body, and we want to get out to this community. We want to get out to this world and change lives. That's what being a Christian is all about, is letting everybody else know the good news of what you found. And there's been plenty of points, even though I may have been looking at the breaking point. I know God, if it hadn't been for God, I wouldn't have made it past that breaking point. I wouldn't even be here today at all. So that's what your tithes and offering do. They all open up the door one more time so that somebody can get that breakthrough, get past that breaking point. So I highly encourage you to give online. You can give on GiveLify app. You can give on North Church, www.northchurchrockmart.com. There's a give button up top there, or you can give the old-fashioned way, cash a check up here in the buckets. But I'm going to ask them to turn the lights back down and play that song one more time. This altar's back. It never closed, but, I'll get up here and pray with you. We'll fight together. Whatever you're going through, we won't leave until you're done fighting. I'll get a key from Vince and I'll lock the doors. But don't fight this battle alone. Don't go back out here the same way you walked in. We love you guys. We'll see you next week.